Hello, my name's John Baldwin. I'm from London Metropolitan University, and this is a video presentation for the conference Teaching and Researching for a Just Transition, Preparing for a More Sustainable Future. I'm going to be talking about a few of my experiences of teaching sustainability in film studies. So I'm a film studies lecturer. Why is education important for sustainable development? That's one of the first slides I'll just be talking through. Then I'll speak about why I think that education for sustainable development is simply good pedagogy. It's good teaching and learning. I'll then speak briefly about film sustainability, representations of the climate crisis, and my example will be an eco-disaster film. I'll talk briefly about alternative representations and critical reflections. So this is a relatively short presentation, kind of tip of the iceberg really. There's lots going on underneath this, but I want to just talk through my experience to hopefully inform your own practice. So why education sustainable development? Of course it's significant for a number of reasons. There's certainly student interest and staff interest in this crucial issue that's confronting us. It's getting increasingly relevant. The issues are becoming increasingly relevant to everyday lives. Ideally as well, there are community links that can be made in trying to alleviate the climate crisis. In terms of education, it's certainly important in terms of the quality agenda, metrics around sustainability performance, and it also reflects, I think, our employers' views and needs. According to Students Organising for Sustainability UK, SOS UK, students and staff across the sector want to see education that puts sustainable development front and centre. So 83% of students and 93% of staff think that it's important that students have knowledge and understanding, skills and competencies to attempt to address and alleviate sustainability challenges. And under my understanding, education for sustainable development is simply good pedagogy. It comes from below, often the disenfranchised, the powerless. So there's an authenticity there. It's not just paying lip service. In terms of good pedagogy, it necessitates a reflection on the content that we offer our students, and I think the delivery as well, insofar as it fosters a critical approach to these issues. It's also significant in terms of employability, in terms of corporate social responsibility, and as I say, fosters this collegiality, this interdisciplinary nature as well. So again, from SOS UK, they link in ESD with decarbonising and decolonising and democratising education. This process then to address and contribute for people to live in a socially and environmentally sustainable world by addressing some of the root causes of how our education system is currently contributing to climate injustice. So in terms of film and sustainability, the industry's carbon footprint is quite profound, quite huge, in terms of air miles, damages to local environments, rubbish left behind, generators for lighting, cooling, and so on and so forth. And there's this notion then that Hollywood is the second most polluting industry in California. There have of course been recent attempts to offset this carbonisation, and we've seen a growth of corporate social responsibility, certainly around the more family-friendly broadcasters like Disney and BBC, who are industry leaders in sustainable television production, for instance, and the rise of green consultants. So I think in terms of our in terms of what we need to offer our students in terms of employability, I think film studies and sustainability offer that, can afford that. In terms of representation, these are core questions of film studies. How are issues, ideas, ideologies, phenomena represented? In terms of the eco-disaster genre, often what happens is that an anxiety is raised, and within an hour and a half, that anxiety is cured. So these narratives animate, and then richly resolve basic cultural conflicts and contradictions. This is what the genre film does. The question is, though, in terms of environmental damage, which is slow and ongoing, it's slow. So how do we combat images that work towards reassuring us of the controllability of disasters such as oil spills? How do we do that? And it's this idea then that disasters that are created by agribusiness, petrobusiness, geoengineering, drug, chemical industries, bankers, investors, are in some sense anonymous. They don't star anyone. They don't serve themselves to film. If we think about environmental damage as being ongoing, slow, anonymous, it doesn't lend itself to the classic Hollywood genre film. It's slow violence, which, as Hayward suggests, have little interest in the sensation-driven technologies of our media image world. So I'm borrowing some ideas from Susan Hayward's book here, Film Ecology, Defending the Biosphere, Donut Economics and Film Theory and Practice. As an example might be The Day After Tomorrow. This was, I guess, a well-meaning film, but it raises those issues that we just spoke about around genre, narrative and representational problems. On the one hand, it simplifies global warming, it simplifies the effects caused by the Arctic cap melting, and all this happens rather fast. In several hours, we get this frost come over New York, as you can see there. It's driven by an individual hero, the president, who begins as a climate denialist and is then obviously converted when he sees what happens. It's special effects driven. It's more of a spectacle about superstorms and this frost that occurs. In terms of resolution, it's quite interesting that we see environmental or climate crisis immigrants go south to Mexico, and we see the young survivors carrying forward for the next generation. So these things are all kind of wrapped up in a neat 1.5 hour package where there's this initial crisis that is solved by an individual hero, and the world kind of largely carries on. So it's all this fast environmental disaster movie rather than what is actually happening, this slow decimation and what's going on in reality. In terms of alternative representations, Hayward again says documentaries are the true leaders on both socio-political and environmental issues, and we might think of the cluster. There's a growing genre of films that both documentaries and fiction that are addressing in one form or another the issue of the climate crisis. There's also the issue of anthropomorphism, with voiceovers imbuing nature and animals with human agency and emotions. This has the effect, arguably, to sanitize or Disneyfy nature, again, almost to make it controllable or something within the human realm. So it's quite anthropomorphic. As for feature films, they would suggest we need a broad range of products which on the one hand expose practices of ecocide, and of course on the other hand we need films with heartwarming narratives of collectivism, compassion and curiosity. I think this is quite important. So I think in terms of embedding ESD in our subject matters, we need to of course raise awareness and suggest how it connects with that subject matter. We need to work through some of the problematics, and we need these alternatives, or we need a hint of a solution. And again, this comes from UK SOS, a good quote. ESD aims to implement and embed pedagogies that will ensure learners are not only equipped with the knowledge and understanding of climate change and sustainability challenges, but that they are also equipped with the skills, competencies and attributes to apply their knowledge. Where only content is included, we run the risk of heightening climate or eco-anxiety among our students without enabling them to develop a means of tackling the challenges we face. So again, instead of just raising climate issue as a huge problem, there needs to be some road out of that problem, some possibilities to avoid this idea of eco-anxiety, which could lead to inertia, paralysis, depression, and so forth. Critical reflections, I think, are important as well. So we've spoke about some alternative representational strategies. There are, of course, and this is what Haywood promotes, different production strategies. So donut economics, which at least uh, aim towards a more sustainable film production mode. Other critical reflections we can make, this idea that can we continue to sustain, is sustainable development as a term an oxymoron, words that don't go together, and it seems as if we await this almost super solution from technology that's going to one day occur. There's also criticism obviously around greenwashing, which pays lip service, and particularly around the carbon footprint, which was once quite an interesting phenomena, but is steadily being criticised. I think the carbon footprint suggests that individuals' footprints are quite big, so we need to consume less, and it's focused on the individual rather than the collective, rather than the wider society. So here's a quote from Matt Huber from I think a really significant book, Climate Change as Class War. For example, a recent study found ExxonMobil adverts systematically worked to shift responsibility for global warming away from the fossil fuel industry and onto consumers. The very first notion of a personal carbon footprint was popularized in 2004 to 6 by oil firm BP. Is this a way of greenwashing, a way of turning attention onto the individual away from, for instance, the fossil fuel industry? So this is a kind of an ideological switch, if you like, which we need to be critical of course. Huber goes on, the incessant focus on consumers and consumption as the ultimate driver of emissions necessarily leads to what I call a politics of less, or what Lee Phillips calls the austerity ecology of much environmentalism. But make no mistake, a politics of less and limits has no resonance for the vast majority of people already living precarious and insecure working class lives, who have no space to grow their own, have nothing to recycle, cannot reduce flights they cannot afford to go on in the first place, or cannot afford the luxury of going green. So here, Huber, I think, raises this debate between those who would promote degrowth to tackle the climate crisis versus, as Huber would suggest, a class-based Green New Deal that would galvanise working class interests to work on ways to, I guess, be more in tune with the environment and build a working class climate consciousness. So there are critical reflections there as well. So to conclude this obviously very quick sweep through a few ideas, I think ESD is simply good pedagogy. It raises critical questions. It touches upon all of our subject matters, I would imagine. In terms of film and sustainability, there's an interest there from staff, from students, from producers, from actors. It can feed into employability, which is one of the categories we need to think of in education. It certainly touches upon classic questions of film studies, classic questions of genre. So I think sustainability is relevant. It's useful. It can be embodied within film studies, fully embodied, not just as an afterthought or an add-on or a final lecture, but fully embodied within the notion of what counts as film, what counts as representation, what counts as production, distribution, exhibition, and so on. In terms of embedding the ESD, then I think at least 3 issues need to be addressed. Obviously, awareness needs to be raised. The problematics don't need to be stepped aside; they need to be dealt with, or they need to be in the process of being worked through, and handled and discussed. And alternatives, I think, are important, or the notion of leading a way out of climate anxiety. And so my invitation finally then is to other subject areas. I think there's going to be interest there. Employability will touch upon other subject areas. It's hard to imagine a discipline not affected in some sense by climate change. And I think crucially then, teaching sustainability offers an interdisciplinary approach, a critical approach, and a collegial approach. So that's my 15 minutes up. Thanks for listening.